Hello and welcome to our latest episode of CIAC Conversations, recorded on the sidelines of our Canada in Asia conference in Singapore earlier this year. I'm Mike Roberts, the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada's Communications Director. Today I'm joined by Kapil Kapoor, the Regional Director for Asia for Canada's International Development Research Centre, or IDRC. Kapil has over 30 years' experience in international development, and before joining the IDRC was the Director General for Southern Africa at the African Development Bank. It was at the African Development Bank that he was responsible for projects and programs across 13 countries in Southern Africa. Poverty reduction, sustainable development, economic management, and governance dynamics are all phrases in Kapil's lexicon. Today he joins me for a discussion on the IDRC's mandate and work, particularly as it intersects with projects and partners in Asia. Please enjoy this CIAC conversation with Kapil Kapoor. Kapil, welcome to the studio at our Canada in Asia Conference 2025. Thank you so much for joining us today. I look forward to a rich discussion with you today on the IDRC and some of its work and activities in the Indo-Pacific region, particularly in Southeast Asia, where we are today in Singapore. But I wanted to start, Kapil, for our listeners who may not be over familiar with the International Development Research Centre, or the IDRC, can you tell us a little bit about its mandate and the work that it does and your role there as Regional Director for Asia?
Okay, thanks very much. So, very pleased to be here. Thanks for having me. Just before I launch into talking about IDRC, I think the Canada in Asia conference is a particularly good opportunity for us to introduce the work we do in the Asia region to audiences in Canada. And we can get into that a little bit later. But for those of you who don't, or your listeners who don't know about IDRC, IDRC was established by an Act of Parliament, a Canadian Act of Parliament in 1970. So we've been around for more than 5 decades. And it's a unique organization in that our mandate is to support research, and research particularly for the purposes of development. We have offices all over the world. We're headquartered in Ottawa. The Asia office is managed out of the New Delhi office. And our programs in Asia right now, we cover about 32 countries, but we similarly have offices in Nairobi, in Dakar, Senegal, in Montevideo, and Amman, Jordan. So one office for each of the continents, but 2 in Africa. People don't realize it, but IDRC has done maybe about $2 billion worth of development research. That's 2 billion Canadian over the last decade. And while, in Asia, it's about $500 million. So what people don't realize is that, when you're financing infrastructure and so forth, $500 million for a continent like Asia might not seem a lot, but for development research, and when you're working with individual grantees, and the average size of a grant is maybe $1 million or $2 million to just do a 1-year or a 2-year study, it's a lot of money. And that is why IDRC has built up this real unique relationship with think tanks, organizations like universities, NGOs, civil society organizations, literally all over the world. And that is why I think this relationship between IDRC as a development research organization and its client base, if you will, is a very close one. And like I said, goes back over 5 decades.
So you mentioned these research projects that are funded to the tune of some $2 billion, $500 million, big packages, over a decade, mind you. What are the actual tangible outputs from that research, and how does that intersect with development kind of on the ground in Asia and in the other continents that you mentioned earlier in your conversation?
Yeah, so the way it works is we presently have a strategy, right, which goes up to 2030, in which we've said, okay, looking at the development challenges that our client countries face, where does IDRC have a comparative advantage? What are the areas we should be focusing on? And we've identified 5 areas, right, where most of the countries, not just in Asia, but in Africa, Latin America, have told us were priorities for them as well. These are issues related to climate, which obviously everyone's facing, issues related to health, issues related to education, issues related to just governance oversight, and finally issues related to how do you support economies that are sustainable. So these are the sort of broad 5 areas. And so what we do is we will go out and we will work with clients, and clients can be local universities, NGOs, because essentially what we do is we fund research agencies in the South. We might twin them with agencies in the North, but basically we are an organization that funds them in the South. And we'll issue call for proposals, and these universities will respond to us, think tanks will respond to us with very specific problems that country or countries are facing in any of these 5 areas. We prefer to do country studies that are, or support research that is multi-country, so that countries can learn from each other, and also just create this virtual ecosystem where countries are learning, building relationships with one another. So I can give you many examples. I mean, let's take the agricultural sector. Climate's a huge area, and so what we try and do is identify sort of unique entry points where we can make a difference. So we like to do it through influencing food systems, right? The impact that climate might have on food systems. So just to give you one example, a few years ago, we decided to fund research in the agricultural sector, where we got a team of Indian researchers together with Canadian researchers, and they looked at a natural plant extract, which is called hexanol. And what this plant extract does, it increases the shelf life of soft fruit like papayas and mangoes, bananas. And the research has developed an application which, when you apply to the shelf of this fruit, expands the life, therefore increasing farmer productivity. And what we've seen in the past few years is 25,000 farmers adopted this. They've seen their incomes rise by 20%. In the next few years, this will go up to 150,000 farmers. So a very small investment in a very targeted area of research, providing income relief to farmers right away by a simple act of increasing the shelf life of their produce. So that's just one example, and there are multiple examples like that.
That's a fantastic case study of the application of research from the pure research into the actual field, literally. Thank you for that one. That's great. Kapil, I wanted to ask you, you've talked about IDRC's work and how it touches down on multiple points on the globe. I wanted to just kind of pivot a little bit to Asia and look at how you support partners in Asia. And can you share any particularly noteworthy projects and positive results of your work in the region, perhaps coming from these 5 areas of focus that you spoke about? Yeah. But just give us a little bit of a Asia project update, if you will.
Sure. So in Asia, as I mentioned before, over the last 10 years or so, we've done $500 million worth of investment across these 5 areas. And what we've created is a research ecosystem of about 200 think tanks, universities, civil society organizations, private sector entities, regional bodies, with whom we have a very intense relationship, some of whom work across the 5 areas, some of whom specialize in individual areas. And often what we will do is we will go into a particular area. Research doesn't result in immediate outcomes. It often takes multiple years of investment. So we try to build long-term relationships with each of these 200 entities that we've done business with over a decade. Let me give you another example specifically. So it turns out that Thailand has a very high rate of liver cancer. And among the many reasons for this, one reason is a parasite that exists in a certain type of fish. So what IDRC did was, over a 6-year period, we financed 20 multidisciplinary teams all across Asia to study this, to follow it up in different communities, and to come up with possible treatments for this. And after a period of 6 years, they came up with a treatment which has now reduced that incidence of having that parasite in fish from 70% down to 1%. And what that has done is reduce the incidence of liver cancer from 50% down to, it's reduced it by 50%. So just as another example. And so here we had some universities from Thailand working on it, some universities from Vietnam, some think tanks from India, some think tanks from Canada. So it's the kind of sort of model we try to use, develop an ecosystem for research, bring researchers from the north, partner them with researchers in the south, and then try and come up with a very specific intervention that will improve the quality of lives. Often we are working with communities at a very local level. So for example, for the past 10 years, if you look at the Mekong Delta, we've been supporting small farmers who live across the Mekong region in the aquaculture sector. So you find a lot of them are dependent. They live in coastal areas. They're dependent on aquaculture for their livelihoods. And what we will do is we'll ask local think tanks, universities, to work with these farmers to see what are the problems brought on as a result of climate and so forth. Climate is impacting their lives in multiple different ways. It is increasing the mortality of fish species and so forth. And so what we have done, again, is develop apps that these farmers can use, which teach them about what's happening to weather patterns, what's happening to fish health, giving them guidance on what types of antimicrobials to use and avoid and so forth. As a result of which, the aquaculture sector in the Mekong region has thrived over the last decade to emerge as the leading aquaculture produce center in the globe, actually, right? So that's just another example of how we work. So, Asia is a complicated place to work. It's multiple countries, it's very different economies. And so what we try and do is adapt our solutions. And that's why we believe so much with local partnerships, because people based in each country understand the cultural situation in the country, the political economy, and so forth. And that's very important to us. I think technical solutions are fine, but if technical solutions are not adapted to local circumstances, you don't get the kind of result you want.
And you're seeing very real results. It's work to be proud of for sure. And thanks for sharing some of those examples with us, Kapil. I wanted to turn back to Singapore, where we are. We're about to launch into our third annual Canada in Asia conference. IDRC has been a big supporter. I thank you on behalf of the Foundation and Universities Canada, our co-partners, for your support. Just been fantastic. This year, we're exploring a variety of central topics, including food security, the blue or ocean economy, clean tech, energy transitions. But sustainability is a theme that comes up time and again. And in the context of expanding Canada-Asia relations and collaboration, specifically on research, but also innovation, new and emergent technologies, what does sustainability mean for you as a driving force in these partnerships and collaborations?
Yeah, so, one can look at sustainability across multiple dimensions, right? So there is this issue of, with the changes in climate that are taking place, how do economies grow sustainably? And so here we look at sort of a range of interventions, food systems, what's happening in terms of housing. We have a very interesting project, for example, in the Philippines, where we're looking at sustainable housing for coastal communities, because coastal communities tend to get ravaged by cyclones and so forth. So for them, sustainability is just how do their houses survive given all the climate changes. You can look at sustainability in terms of livelihoods, right? With all the changes that are going on in technology, there's a lot of discussion on how artificial intelligence is going to impact the jobs of the future. And for a lot of the young people, sustainability is in terms of, will I have a job? Will I be able to feed my family based on all the displacement that is going on? Sustainability can be in terms of health sector interventions. We've seen what happened post-pandemic. And we've worked with multiple sort of research entities to prepare health systems to how do you ensure that health systems can be more prepared for pandemics and epidemics, because we think we might see more of them in the future given what's happening as a result of climate. So the sustainability of health systems depends upon making sure that health systems are ready to respond and governments are ready to respond based on whatever these changes might throw at us. We talked about sustainability in terms of, the education sector is another one. So given what the jobs of the future will look like, we are really, as IDRC, investing a lot in ed tech to equip teachers so that they can improve the quality of the curriculum, so that students are being able to use technology to really be able to respond to the changes that take place. So when you ask me, what do I think about sustainability, I'm looking at all these multiple dimensions of sustainability in everything we do.
Excellent. Yeah, it is multifaceted for sure. I wanted to ask you a little bit about emergent technologies. It is a theme that we'll be looking at the conference, not a sector, but kind of a cross-cutting theme, and that is emergent technologies, particularly or specifically machine intelligence and artificial intelligence. It sounds like IDRC has its kind of eye on the horizon about what's happening, what's coming, disruptions, displacements, also opportunities, some optimism. Can you give us a little bit of a picture from your desk, what you see AI, machine intelligence, those sort of emergent technologies, what sort of role you see them playing in the future as it kind of relates to the development of emerging economies in Asia particularly?
So for over a decade now, we've had an AI-related program in Africa. We are now starting a very new and different AI program for Asia. AI has multiple dimensions, and sometimes it's very difficult for people to understand what you're talking about when you're referring to AI. For me personally, and for some of us working, we like to think about AI in terms of specific applications. How do you use AI in a way that will not displace people, but will work with people and enhance the productivity of what they're trying to do? If we can support the right kind of AI, then I think AI can be a force for the good. And so right now we are, even as we speak, there's an event taking place in Taiwan where a lot of people are gathered to study how do we make AI sustainable? How do we sustain AI in such a way that the populations of the future will benefit from it? Of course, there are no easy answers. We are a research organization, and these are issues that we are now starting to study in earnest. Our interventions in Asia obviously will differ very much from other parts of the world because the technology ecosystem, the AI ecosystem, is quite developed in Asia. The kind of applications, for example, in India that we have seen, and again, there's a difference between using data for accelerating transactions as opposed to AI. I'd like to make that distinction because over the last 4 or 5 years, what one is seeing is the whole transformation of the payments system in India. Everyone has an access to cell phones. Everyone is using at the touch of a button. All payment transactions have been sort of automated. Not necessarily AI, right? That's great use of technology. But now what government in India is doing is saying, this is generating a lot of data. How can AI be used to mine this data so that we can improve service delivery? So if a lot of these transactions are in the health sector, in the education sector, the data can tell us how are people spending their money, how much are they spending on medicine, how much are they spending on education, how much are they spending on Wi-Fi, on whatever. And so what does this imply then for service delivery? So a lot of initiatives around how do you influence government service delivery using AI to mine large amounts of data. And we see similar applications in other parts of the world. We are looking at companies that are involved in medical research. There was a very interesting proposal that came to us the other day where companies are looking at cancer research. And right now, when we want to treat cancer, it's very difficult to distinguish between the good cells and the bad cells in the human body. It's like using a hammer sometimes to try and, identify a tiny little nail somewhere. And so what this is doing is taking the entire sort of human body and trying to map every single cell using AI with the view that in the future, we'll be able to identify which precise cell which is cancerous to target so that the good cells around it can survive. So there are multiple dimensions of this technology that we are looking at. And again, being a research organization, we want to support those type of entities so that we can get real, results at the end of the day.
There are probably applications for AI that we haven't even thought of or considered yet, and will become part of our everyday lives within 5 years or a decade or even sooner. I wanted to circle back to this idea of data mining, though, because, I get it. If there's a cluster of cancer outbreaks or there's a run on a certain medication and the government can respond, it can see that happening through AI and AI applications and data mining. Mm-hmm. There's a dark side to that as well. That data can be used in other ways, perhaps nefarious. What are your thoughts on how do we put the cage, if you will, around these sorts of technologies so that the governance is solid, but also there's a containment beyond the human, beyond the human application?
Oh, absolutely. I think the governance of AI is another critical area where we are investing a lot. We are supporting organizations that are doing research into what kind of governance is appropriate. There are lots of countries that are moving ahead with this. Clearly, the data can be misused, and so there need to be guardrails around it. There's a big debate that is taking place right now, which is saying, and posing the essential question, when does regulation become a constraint to future innovation and development? Is it possible to put in place guardrails that don't crush innovation? And so that's the sort of fine line that we are really, and a lot depends upon where is the data kept, who's mining the data, who has access to the data. In a sense, it even goes beyond AI, right? Because data for AI is one thing, but if someone wants to just get your data for something else, what are the guardrails around how that whole process is managed? Many countries are giving this a lot of thought. Many countries have made sure that they, the other debate that's going on is data better managed by the public sector or by the private sector? Where some people are concerned that if governments get access to your data, what can they use it for? As opposed to if the private entities get access to your data, how will they use it for their own benefits? And there are pluses and minuses on both sides. And again, no easy answers. All I can tell you is what we are trying to do is to support research in this area, trying to address issues and put these issues on the table so that civil society institutions can discuss this, debate this, and every country can then adopt what it feels is the right way for it to go. But I think the earlier point you made is that these technologies are incredibly powerful. They can be an incredible source for good, but in the wrong hands, they can also do a lot of damage. So I think collectively we need to find a solution to this.
And I suspect you'll be sending out a lot more requests for proposals from the IDRC in the coming years exactly in this area. Thank you for that. Thank you. Kapil, I wanted to return to our CIAC 2025 event here in Singapore. As I mentioned earlier, it's kicking off today. We're all very excited. By the time our listeners are accessing this podcast, the conference will have concluded. But looking ahead into this week, can you tell us what IDRC's presence at the conference is looking like? What are you guys doing here on the ground? You alluded to it a little bit earlier, but who are you planning to meet with or hoping to meet with, to network with? What's your kind of engagement strategy here at the conference? Because it's not your first rodeo. You guys have been here on our last two conferences, so you know what it's all about. What are your takeaways going to be, do you anticipate?
So I think we're expecting, as you know, roughly 700 to 800 people attending this conference, a large contingent of whom are actually coming from Canada. One of the things we've found is that what IDRC has not done as well as it should is to be able to talk about the work we do and to talk about the impact that we're having. So my personal motivation, goal, if you will, over the next 2 days or so, is to be able to tell the story of IDRC a little bit. We are going to have one plenary session tomorrow where I hope to talk very briefly in a similar Q&A format about the work of IDRC and the impact. We are planning to host a side event where I hope to go into a bit more detail about what we do and give a few more examples of what we do. But then it presents an exceptionally good networking opportunity where we're hoping to meet with members from Canadian academia. Many of the universities are present over here, people who represent global affairs. We're interacting a lot with the ambassadors, the high commissioners, the trade representatives from the various Canadian councils and missions from all over the region. We've also invited several of our own grantees to come and participate in the event so that they can themselves tell a story to the participants from Canada and elsewhere about the work that they do, because we feel that this sort of relationship building and networking is very, very important. I can tell a story, but if you're hearing it directly from the researcher, I think it tells a very different story. So that's what we're hoping to do. We're also hoping to listen in some of the sessions dealing with the blue economy, on AI, on food systems and so forth, with the view of getting ideas, because those ideas really help us program what we are going to do in the future. So yes, what we've done in the past I think is very interesting, but really what is the relevant agenda for the future? What are people thinking of? What's concerning them? And with those ideas, we'll take it back to IDRC management and say, here are what people are thinking of. How do we program ourselves going forward in the next year or two to respond to these sorts of challenges? So an incredible networking opportunity as well.
Oh, that's fantastic to hear, and I'm glad that you're actually able to use this as kind of an incubator of kind of synergies and ideas and take it home to IDRC. Kapil Kapoor, Regional Director for Asia with the International Development Research Center, I thank you for your time today. I know you're busy here on the ground in Singapore. I hope you enjoy the conference. I hope you get lots out of it and lots to take away for yourself and for your peers and partners. Thank you again for joining us today, and best of luck at the show, as they say, and I look forward to speaking to you again in the future.
Great. Thanks very much. Pleasure talking to you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to our latest episode of CIAC Conversations, featuring Kapil Kapoor, the Regional Director for Asia for Canada's IDRC. Be sure to visit us online for more podcasts and research from the Asia-Pacific Foundation of Canada. Until next time, thank you for listening.